On July 4, 1776, while 56 men signed the Declaration of Independence proclaiming that all men are created equal, 500,000 people remained enslaved in American colonies. Thomas Jefferson, the document's primary author, owned 600 enslaved people. This is the founding contradiction of the United States, a country born of freedom on a foundation of slavery. The history you know is only half the truth. In 1760, the 13 British colonies in North America had 1.5 million inhabitants and were part of the greatest empire history had ever seen. Britain had won the 7 Years' War in 1763, expelling France from North America, but the war debt was enormous. London decided the colonies should foot the bill. This simple fiscal calculation would trigger the greatest political revolution of the 18th century. The crisis began in 1765 with the Stamp Act, the first direct tax imposed by the British Parliament on the colonies. Furious Americans cried, "No taxation without representation." In 1770, British soldiers opened fire on a crowd in Boston, killing 5 colonists, the Boston Massacre. In 1773, colonists disguised as Native Americans hurled 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor, in an act of defiance known as the Boston Tea Party. In response to the Boston Tea Party, the British Parliament passed the Intolerable Acts in 1774, closing Boston Harbor and suspending Massachusetts' colonial government. Instead of crushing the rebellion, these acts united the colonies. In September 1774, the First Continental Congress gathered representatives from 12 of the 13 colonies in Philadelphia. The coordination London sought to prevent had arrived, and with it, the inevitability of war. On April 19, 1775, the first shots of the Revolution rang out at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. About 700 British soldiers marched to seize colonial weapons. Local militias confronted them. By day's end, 73 British soldiers and 49 militiamen lay dead. It was the shot heard around the world. The war that nobody wanted to officially declare had begun. George Washington was 43 when he was named Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army in June 1775. A Virginia plantation owner and holder of 316 enslaved people, Washington was not a brilliant general by instinct, but he had something more valuable, unshakable resilience. He lost more battles than he won. His army deserted repeatedly. But he never quit, transforming resistance into strategy and perseverance into victory. Thomas Jefferson, age 33, drafted the Declaration of Independence in 17 days. Benjamin Franklin, at 70, was the diplomatic architect who convinced France to enter the war on America's side in 1778, a decisive alliance. On the British side, King George III, intransigent and deaf to negotiation. The Loyalists, colonists who remained faithful to the crown, estimated at 20% of the population, were the Revolution's greatest internal enemy. The winter of 1777–78 at Valley Forge was the moment the Revolution nearly died. Washington's 12,000 soldiers camped in terrible conditions, without proper boots, with minimal rations, in below-freezing temperatures. 2,500 died from disease and starvation, more than in any battle. Washington wrote that his army was, in rags, without shoes, leaving bloody footprints in the snow. The Revolution survived by inches. The decisive battle was Yorktown, in October 1781. Washington, with 17,000 American and French soldiers, surrounded General Cornwallis and his 8,000 British troops. For 3 weeks, relentless bombardment destroyed the English defenses. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered, humiliatingly sending a representative in his place. The British band played "The World Turned Upside Down." The world had, indeed, been turned upside down. The Yorktown surrender was not the immediate end of the war, minor fighting continued until 1783. But in Britain, the impact was devastating. Lord North's government fell in March 1782. The Treaty of Paris, signed in September 1783, formally recognized American independence and ceded all British territories east of the Mississippi River. The world's greatest empire had lost its most prized possession. The new country was born with enormous problems. The war debt stood at $43 million, impossible to pay at the time. The Loyalists, around 60,000 people loyal to the Crown, were expelled or fled to Canada and the Caribbean. Native Americans who had supported the British lost their lands and protection. In 1787, the Constitution was drafted, but delegates failed to resolve slavery, postponing the conflict that would explode 74 years later in the Civil War. The human cost was brutal: 25,000 American soldiers dead, more than half from disease and starvation than from combat. The British lost 20,000. Tens of thousands of civilians died in raids, disease, and displacement. The Native American tribes who had supported the British, Iroquois, Cherokee, Creek, suffered destruction of their lands and villages. And the 500,000 enslaved people. The Revolution for Liberty changed nothing in their lives. The Revolution's fundamental contradiction, freedom for some, slavery for others, sparked immediate debate. John Adams wrote that slavery was a cancerous sore. Alexander Hamilton advocated for its abolition. But Southern states threatened to leave the Union if slavery were attacked. The 1787 Compromise counted enslaved people as 3/5 of a person for representation purposes, a dehumanizing equation written into the Constitution itself. In Europe, Enlightenment philosophers hailed the American Revolution as the dawn of a new era. Voltaire and Rousseau celebrated. In Paris, the news directly inspired the French Revolution of 1789. But in England, Edmund Burke sharply criticized it. For him, the American Revolution was a dangerous experiment that would destroy the social order. And in America itself, half the population, women, enslaved people, the propertyless, had no right to the vote the Revolution proclaimed. Official American history turned the Founding Fathers into demigods: Jefferson, Washington, Franklin, Adams. The myth of manifest destiny and the land of freedom was built upon convenient silences. Only in the 20th century did historiography begin systematically questioning it: slavery, indigenous genocide, the exclusion of women. Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States in 1980 was the most influential in revising the American founding myth. The American Revolution created the constitutional republic model that shaped dozens of countries. The Declaration of Independence inspired the French Revolution in 1789, Latin American revolutions in the 19th century, and decolonization movements in the 20th. The concept of inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, transformed global political philosophy. The United States today, with 335 million people and the world's largest economy, is the direct consequence of 1776. The contradictions of 1776 echo through the 21st century. The debate over racial equality in the United States is a direct heir to the slavery the Founding Fathers perpetuated. The unequal power between large and small states, another 1787 Compromise, shapes contemporary American politics. And the tension between individual freedom and collective good, debated in Philadelphia in 1787, still defines the cultural and political wars of America today. The American Revolution was a glorious paradox, the most influential proclamation of freedom in modern history, made by men who enslaved other human beings. It created the model of democracy the world adopted, and exposed the hypocrisy that still haunts the world's greatest power. The revolution remains unfinished. If you enjoyed this story, like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories.